Well, we have a big Calvin Cater fight coming up this weekend, and there's another incident that's been happening in the news involving a Calvin Cater fight, his fight against Max Holloway, which Josh and I talked about. But there was an incident that occurred during that fight that Dan Hardy did not take kindly to. He kind of said that Dana White made up a scenario where he wanted to be mic'd and filmed, showing that he had concern over Cater and was wanting him to go to the doctors. He said that that was staged. Dana came back in his normal way of saying, fuck you. It was not staged. It was because of COVID and things like that. A lot going on with this, but what's your real take on it?
I think there's a little bit of truth behind it all. I think that Dana did make it. I think right. Dana was mic'd, I believe, for probably a documentary they were doing for their shows under COVID because they were in the small arena at the Apex having these fights. It's very likely they wanted to showcase how they were doing their fights or able to do their fights during COVID. So why not have a camera crew around following Dana White as well as the fighters all behind the scenes saying this is how we are doing it. Just in case someone did get COVID, I'm sure they were documenting everything to protect their own ass and Dana White's and the UFC's, which is very smart. They were probably filming that documentary, John, to make sure that if any step had needed to be processed for something that happened to them, that they had already had the film saying, hey, see, our fighters are being tested. Our fighters are being put in quarantine. Our fighters are this. If someone gets hurt, this is how I approach it. Get this fighter to the hospital as soon as possible. This protected the UFC 100%, having video footage or however you want to call it. I think it's a smart play by the UFC. So to say that it was staged, possibly not. Now, it may have been.
But that wasn't at the Apex. That wasn't at the Apex.
Where was it at? It was.
Max Holloway against
the
Cater?
Max. Yeah, I believe it was. Yes.
That wasn't at the Apex. Was that fight at the Apex?
I believe so.
I don't believe so.
I believe it was.
Really?
Okay.
You could be right.
I believe it was.
But
I believe it was. Okay. Now, let's just say, even if it wasn't at the Apex, that would still make sense that the UFC was taking full advantage of, hey, this is how we have our fighters taken care of and the safety we're taking. Now, Dana from across is saying, let's get this fighter to the hospital as soon as possible. That just makes sense as well. I'm the president of the UFC. Let me go ahead and make sure that I let everyone know that I'm looking out for my guys. Now, whether you believe that's staged or not, I believe that he probably is thinking to himself, I've got to protect myself. I've got to protect this company. And the best way to do that is to let this be known that I'm mic'd up and that there's a camera crew behind me. Let's get this guy to the hospital, whatever it is. That's smart on his play. For Dan to bring it up, hey, maybe to him that is dirty. And I like Dan Hardy a lot. But to think that Dana's not smart enough to look out for his own ass and protect the company that he helped build would be naive.
Yeah. In looking at it, it was at the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi is where the fight took place. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't saying it was in the Apex. So that was during that whole COVID, era as far as, not a lot of people or nobody in the arena and stuff. But the real thing here is, and this is something I think that needs to be, one of the things that Dana has been able to rest his hat on, okay, and it's a sizable hat because he needs, to keep the glare off of, that bald head, is he's been able to rest his hat on the fact, Josh, you take a look, and you can look at all the numbers that are associated. We just had UFC 280. Well, that's now just pay-per-views. So that number's only going up about 12 per year. All right. We're on, fight night number, 260 something or other, who knows? And we've got, so the UFC has got to be closing in on over 1,000 shows.
Yeah.
Has to be. It's coming up. And the one thing that he's been able to always be able to say, always been able to put out there is, we have never in the history of this organization, no matter if he was part of it or not, no one has ever died in that organization. Now, have there been fighters that have died in MMA? Yes, there have. But one of the things that, early on, like the UFC did do things with, physicians and medicals and things like that to make sure that they were trying to do the right things for the fighters to make sure that they were healthy enough to fight. Are fighters going to always, be honest about stuff? No. Are they always trying to hide things? Yes. But the fact that
TJ Dillashaw just hit it last weekend. TJ Dillashaw just hit it from everybody last weekend. Yeah, it's common.
Exactly. And so it's a matter of the UFC, does what they can do. They have, Dr. Jeff Davidson is there as a person that works for the UFC. He goes to the shows. He used to be part of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. He is the UFC's doctor. Now, a lot of people will look at that and go, well, that's not good. Yes, it is. They pay that man money to see any fighter that needs to be seen during a show that if he is at, sometimes he's not at them, or in between, they'll fly that fighter into the Vegas area where Doc Davidson is at. That's all smart business. That makes things, handy for the UFC, and they know that they've got a qualified person giving an expert opinion on what their fighter is. And the fact that, like I said, over 1,000 shows, we'll say, I can't say how many fights, every fighter has been able to come back and do it again if they wanted. That's an amazing record, because you can take a look at professional football, can't come close to it. Basketball cannot come close to it. Hockey cannot come close to it. It's an amazing record when you think of what our sport is. And the fact that Dana can say that proves partly of he does care about making sure that once the fighter is out of the fight, they get the medical attention they need to take care of them. I'm not saying, that everything was kosher with, what happened in Abu Dhabi there and with what Dan Hardy saw. I know Dan Hardy doesn't lie, but I don't think that Dana was doing something as a setup. I think he does care. Okay. He's a pain in the ass, but he does care. And it's, a matter of, that's not something I think that he takes lightly, is the fighter's health.
Yeah, I'm gonna toot Dana's horn a little bit, and I've talked about this on the show I think once before. Is that I had an injury coming off in 2003 from Frank Shamrock Spiro me in the spine. I had a sciatica problem. Well, he had sent me off. I had a sharp pain that went all the way down to the back of my ankle, into my calf, all the way up into my spine and my neck. And he had flew me out to Vegas, and he had sent me to a couple of different doctors, and they had all looked at me, all checked me out. I went through some. There was a doctor, you called him like the witch doctor or whatever. I can't remember.
Oh, the witch doctor, Doc Steve.
There you go. I went to him. Then I also went to an acupuncturist. He sent me to an acupuncturist. All of them were all pre-called upon. I went to every single doctor for about 3 days. They pulled me out. They made sure, hey, when are we going to be able to get this guy to fight? He's been under contract now with us for about 8 months. He's been injured twice. So let's try to get him healthy. What can we get him to look at everything about him? X-rays, MRI. They went through the process and said, look, there's a couple little issues here. He had them work on me, and they actually referred me to doctors in California for me to see. I do understand. Look, when the fighters sign with them, they're an investment. They are investing their money to promote you, to make you a star. Now it's up to you to get the job done. So I understand.
To make that money.
Yes, and Dana is trying to spend his money properly. If you're willing to go out there and work your ass off and do the job that you're supposed to do by winning the fight and then talking up the fights, then he's going to continue to do that for you. Now, I don't understand the deal with Dan Hardy and what's going on with the being fired and something to do with some female. I'm actually going to stay away from that. I don't know anything about it, so I can't really speak on that. But you can tell that there's a little animosity between the two on how the whole thing was handled, and on top of that, I've been through. How can I put this? I've seen that when guys are let go, that there is even when fighters are let go, there is like that I should have been told maybe by Dana, or I should have been talked to. And I understand that sometimes Dana is not the person. It's just to be like, look, let's just cut the ties. Let it go. Yep. And maybe Dan got slided by that. And then now this situation has all come to an head. However this all worked out, the back and forth though, I think it's going to be the way it is and how this is all handled. But I think Dana in no way was trying to set this all up to be like, hey, look at me. The majority of the time he does do that. But I do know that he does want these fighters to be healthy because he wants to make money off of them.